Skinamarink is an experimental, low-budget horror film about two young children trapped in a house with a supernatural force. The movie stands out immediately for its unique visual style, but let's take a look and see what else it has to offer. Welcome, everyone, to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, and joining me, as always, is Tim.
Oh, hello there. Hi.
I mean, if you're watching the video version, you'll see we're having a little bit of fun with the setup here to match the movie we're about to talk about. If you listen to the audio version, you don't care. You can't see anything. It's just business as usual for you.
Listen, you're missing out if you're not watching it, because what other, film review podcast would put in this 5% amount of effort?
I moved a few sliders around. That was basically all I did. But yes, welcome. This is a horror movie podcast. We get together and we talk about a horror movie we watched. And by the time you get this episode, this will be months out of date. But let it be known that when we're recording this is a new release on Shudder. We're here today to talk about Skinamarink, which is an experimental indie art house horror film that was getting some buzz online over the last couple of months. It had a very small theater release.
And you left out a key word there. Canadian horror film.
Oh, it's Canucksploitation. I didn't even realize. Yes. Oh, very good. So,
I mean, when you watch the movie, you kind of quickly realize this could only come from the sick mind of a Canadian.
I don't know. I tend to find Canadians to be quite friendly and charming.
Then you haven't met anyone from the real Canada.
Oh, okay. So yeah, this has a budget of 15,000 Canadian dollars, which is not a lot of money. That's basically nothing for a movie. So, super indie, super art house, and honestly, it feels weird to even try and give a premise for it in the spoiler-free section, because I obviously we watched the movie. I've got thoughts about what it is, but other than the fact that describing just that it's a lot of scenes in darkness, it's a lot of seemingly just following two kids who are in a house on their own and their parents are missing. Beyond that, I don't know what to describe here for the premise. I mean, it's it's kind of a puzzle. There's definitely some influences from abstract filmmakers and stuff like that, which is, needless to say, this is not going to work for everyone. Before we even get to how we felt about it, I knew going in this was the sort of movie that's going to, some people are going to hate it, some people are going to love it.
I'm surprised that it's not from Antarctica, because man, this was polarizing.
I can't even see your face, Tim, but I know that you've got a smug smile on your face right now. I could sense it. I was joking before we started that Tim looks like he's on a documentary where they're interviewing a victim of a crime, but they can't reveal their identity, so he's just in silhouette.
Yeah, I murdered him.
I said you were the victim, Tim.
Oops. Cut that last part out.
That's blowing this case wide open.
This is only the second episode of a 7-part Netflix series, so we'll see where it goes from there.
So yeah, so we'll get into it. Obviously we'll start spoilers.
What I don't understand is what was
I'm so glad you interrupted me. Sit there and not know what you're going to say for 5 minutes.
It was Exorcist 3 that we just watched, where they left out some parts of the cases because they didn't want people coming in and claiming that they were the killer and stuff, so they would leave out specific things so they could
yes.
But I don't know, do people actually do that? Who's I'm gonna take the rap for this serial killer? I get there's probably people that want to seek fame and stuff, but then also it's with that can be a prison sentence and life in jail and stuff. Is it worth it?
I mean, it's it's just nut jobs who want to take credit. They want the infamy for some reason. I mean, it's stupid, but that's just how it is, I guess. So But hey,
Cool.
um,
Glad we got that out of the way.
yeah. So all I was trying to say to him before was that we're starting spoiler free, and we'll give you a warning before we go into spoilers. So just trying to get that public service announcement out of the way.
Shortest spoiler-free section on any review.
Yeah, I can't say it's going to last very long beyond just our general impressions, but we'll see how it goes.
Honestly, I was trying to think. I was like, this could potentially be either the shortest episode we've ever done or the longest. I don't know. It's interesting.
We'll see where we're not going to hit 2 hours and 40 minutes like Halloween Kills. Tim, come on.
That's fair. Yeah.
There's not a chance in hell we're hitting that. So yeah, directed by Kelly Edward Ball. I've set it up as best I can without getting into spoilers, I think. So I guess I'll just ask Tim the question that everyone's wondering is, Tim, what did you think of Skinamarink?
Well, why don't we come back to me? Why don't you? How about you tell me how you felt about it?
Well, I'll simplify the question because maybe that was too open to consider, like, actually having thoughts. So, did you like the experience of watching Skinamarink? Maybe that's a better question to start with.
Geez, yeah, it's really tough because there's a lot of things that I do generally really like about it that I think are really awesome, and there's stuff that I kind of want to like champion and express gratitude for. Like, I love that this is like you said, it's like an indie experimental movie that was made for nothing, and it's awesome that it actually got a theatrical release and actually made like quite a bit of money, like not a ton, but I think it's over like the $1 million mark, which considering its budget is like pretty dope. And the fact that it's on Shudder and people are talking about it, that's awesome. And like I love championing these small like indie out of nowhere movies. And I think the film is there are parts that are quite unsettling. There are parts that as a horror fan I thought were really cool and interesting. I love the look of it. That being said though, I don't know, I don't think I necessarily enjoyed my first experience watching it. I say first because I feel like this is something I do want to try to go back and after like talking about it with people and like looking up like some stuff about it, like I'm curious to see how it might play on a second viewing. But it was kind of hard getting through this first viewing. I mean, part of it was I wasn't really watching it in ideal circumstances. I started like late on Saturday night after a pretty long session of God of War. I kept saying like, all right, as soon as I beat this quest, I'll start watching it. And then the quest was a lot longer than I thought. But hey, it was pretty cool. And I got to fight this like big grandma, which was fun. But
I know what part of the game you're talking about, actually.
But yeah, I started late on a Saturday, which I actually thought was gonna be kind of cool because of the like I heard like the movie's like very like weird and freaky, and that like some people say like, oh yeah, like it's actually like really effective if you watch it like alone in the dark late at night on a laptop with headphones and that kind of thing. That I was like, okay, yeah, that could be interesting. But then unfortunately I was so tired that I couldn't make it through, so then I had to pick it up the next day, which I don't think is I don't think is necessarily the ideal way to watch this movie. But I don't know, again, there's a lot of very cool interesting things about it, but then there's also a lot of stuff that like I don't know, kind of drove me crazy watching it, which I guess I'll leave it at that for now because there's a lot of stuff to get into about it. But yeah, I'll have that as my initial response to your query.
To my query. Yeah, I'm glad this exists. I'm glad that it's got a platform and that people are seeing it, but I'm not entirely sure all of it worked for me. I kind of agree that there are specific moments, the specific shots or scenes that are exceptional, and I love what it's doing in those moments, but it's that sort of thing where it might be just too experimental for its own good, where in between those major moments that I really liked, there was a lot of just watching a corner of a room, and there barely been there's maybe the sound of a cartoon playing in the TV in the background, and it'll do that for extended periods of time in between the major moments happening. And every time I went back to that, I just kind of, there was like almost like a sigh as the movie went on. I'm like, okay, we're back to doing this then for another couple of minutes, waiting for the next thing to happen. And I felt bad thinking that, because like I really wanted to love this movie, because I love the, I don't know, they almost, I think one of the influences that's been cited for it is David Lynch, and I can definitely feel some of that. I
heard like Eraserhead being thrown around a lot before, like watching the movie.
I can definitely feel that sort of like unreal dread and like that kind of like ethereal stuff that we just can't understand. It's so horrific that we can't comprehend. And there was also like, like, so there's the literal read of the film, and then there's the, okay, what's the movie really about idea. And, I was having some thoughts, especially early on, about what the movie was kind of really saying something about, beyond just being this terrifying kind of like idea and like, just a supernatural presentation of a horror movie where these kids are in danger. And I think there's some interesting things to talk about, and there's, like I said, there's some fantastic scenes, and I love the feel and the aesthetic that it's going for, but it's so aggressive with never showing anything resembling a normal movie that at times it's like, okay, you're actually a detriment now to the movie that I've been looking at the corner of this couch for like 2 minutes without anything really happening. It's too much. And the movie's like an hour and 40 minutes, and I almost do wonder, like, do a lot of my problems get fixed if you just cut it down by like 20 minutes and just tighten up a lot of these sections in between the big moments? I get that you have to have some of it to build the atmosphere, but and I think it even starts kind of in a poor way, in that you go maybe 10 minutes before you get something concrete that feels like the start of a story. You get a lot of abstract stuff for like 10 minutes before you really get something you can kind of cling to and say, okay, this is some context for what's maybe actually going on now. And then from there you start to have something you can kind of understand, you can kind of follow along as you're watching the movie. So I'm kind of in a similar vein. Like, I wanted to love it. I appreciate that it exists. I'm glad that it exists, and I'm glad for all the weird experimentation that goes on in it. But I think large chunks of it are very frustrating to watch, and dare I say, kind of boring. Which is the sad part. And the problem is if you find yourself feeling that way, is that it takes you out of the mood that the film's trying to keep you in. And I think it hinders even the better moments, which are good. Like, there's moments in here that are great on their own. And, there's a scene in the middle in a bedroom that I think stands out, and that most people will probably say is like one of the best scenes in the movie. I think the final shot is excellent and is exactly maybe the way it should have ended, which is great. But yeah, there's just a lot of stuff in between the moments that I liked. So
yeah. And like, what's kind of funny is like earlier today I went on Wikipedia just to kind of like look at the summary to see like if there's maybe something that I missed, because I don't know, I feel like there's like, I feel like there was stuff that I got, but I mean, Lord knows that I could have easily overlooked something or whatever. And like, as I was looking at the summary, like it's very straightforward. It's like, all right, this happens and this happened and then that happens, and like as I'm reading it, it like made me kind of. It was almost like a much better experience than watching the movie, because I was like, oh yeah, like because it's just talking about like the the major like parts of the movie where stuff happens, so it's like, oh yeah, that part was cool, and oh yeah, that part was cool, and oh yeah, that part was creepy, but like you're saying, like you're getting all like the best bits without the 5 minutes of just watching a wall or a pile of toys for like minutes straight with like no sound or muffled sound or like a voice you can't hear or something like that. So yeah, it's like you said, I hate to complain about it, because it sounds like you're being like, it's too artsy, like why don't they just make it easier to, or whatever. But I like the way you put it, that it is, in a way, it is almost like to its detriment, where it's like, yeah, you're getting in your own way a little bit. I do agree though, like if you tighten it up, like just because I don't think that you should get rid of like those maybe more like those kind of static shots, because that is kind of like the setup and the atmosphere of the movie and stuff. Like, so I think it's fine to have it, just have less of it. Like especially for a movie that's an hour 40, like, yeah, you could easily shorten like some of that stuff and yeah, get it down to like an 80-ish something minute movie, and I think it'd work a lot better.
Yeah, I think
but it's
that
a
would
shame
help it.
because yeah, the parts at work are really cool. Like,
Yeah, and it's funny because obviously, I went in wanting an art house horror movie. I was going in wanting this experimental movie, and it's
oh,
just
yeah, I didn't. You didn't think like, oh, this is gonna be the next Smile or
yeah,
something.
exactly.
Like,
Like I wanted it to be this challenging kind of like film that was playing with expectations and playing with how you make a movie and doing it with these like interesting limitations. But it goes a little bit too far. And I think one of the things that I think David Lynch like deserves so much praise for, to compare that to his work a little bit, is that yeah, David Lynch is weird and he does a lot of weird things, but everything feels so pinpoint and like I don't think I've ever in any David Lynch movie or TV show where he's the one who's the creative force behind it, right? So when I say that, I mean that, I'm not counting like the middle of season 2 of Twin Peaks because he wasn't there for that. I don't think I've ever felt myself getting bored or frustrated with what he's doing, even though he's doing weird things or he's doing something where he's testing the audience's like patience almost with a scene. I know, like, there's always just everything's just so pinpoint with how he actually like has got the audience's attention. Now, some people don't like David Lynch and they think all of it's nonsense, and it's never going to please them. But as someone who gets into his worlds and into his like kind of mindset, all of it works. Whereas with this, I was trying like so hard to get into like the movie, and it was capturing me for these specific moments, and then it was losing me. And that was and it felt like like obviously I think people might compare it to PT. I was thinking like it definitely gave me some like survival horror vibes to things of that nature. Well, I think specifically PT because that sort of has this kind of same tone, the analog static sounds, and the idea that something's went on with this family, and it's very it's got this, what's the word I'm looking for, not omnipotent, this very ethereal horror, this like dread mixed with ethereal horror that something really bad, because you almost get the feeling when you watch this that like there's no chance of anyone living, there's no chance of like this having a happy ending, and that's not spoiling what happens in the movie. I'm just saying what it felt like from the start. It felt like we were watching kind of like the almost like the voyeuristic kind of like look at what's happened to some family because some forces like interfered with them, right? And there was never a chance of them getting out of it because the bad things already happened. And that's kind of what you feel in PTs. You're kind of learning that there's something bad really happened to whoever this person is that you're playing as. And and if people don't know what PT is, PT was like a short game that was meant to be a lead-in to a new Silent Hill game that unfortunately got cancelled. But it got a lot of buzz when it came out because it was really experimental and it was really dread-filled and all that. And I think some of the emotions that it was kind of evoking and some of the feelings that it was evoking, I was reminded of it watching Skinamarink.
I think like especially just like the feeling of like being trapped and being in like a feels very otherworldly, like it doesn't feel like you're just in a normal house where you could just step outside and be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely there, and that was a big part of PT, is that you're trying to just escape the house, and obviously it's not as abstract as this because it's a video game and you're playing it, but like it's abstract in the sense that things are repeating, you're hearing these audio bits over the news and these little hints. This felt like it was that taken to like the extreme where it's so, and part of it's meant to be that you were seeing this through the fear, the very scary lens of a child who's scared, right? And all of it's kind of that, and and I was sort of reading into it as well in my head. I was thinking about, well, obviously there's this supernatural stuff going on and this is what the movie literally is, but I was thinking, does this represent something? Does this represent just the fear of something that happens to a child? It's not actually like a supernatural horror thing in real life, but it's just, is this the fear of your parents abandoning you? Is this the fear of like a parent dying or something like that? And that's what this whole movie represents, is kind of that, the dread of that happening to you. And this is just kind of the child's imagination like sort of coming, like that's what the movie really is just the kid's imagination sort of filling it in. And I'm not saying it necessarily is that. I'm just,
someone better tell that kid to talk to a psychiatrist. What
do you mean, Skinamarink?
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, so I'm very frustrated because I wanted to love this. And I still respect it more than a lot of like I'll respect this way more than you brought up Smile or Truth or Dare or any mediocre mainstream horror movie. Like I will say that I'm glad this exists way more than any of them. But
totally, yeah,
it's definitely a rougher watch.
Yeah, I'm as much happier to, you know, I don't want to say like waste my time, but like like spend my time watching this than just like some generic thing that just didn't really have any like love or passion put into it. Like, I mean, say what you want, but clearly Mr. Ball made the movie he wanted to make. Like, he was clearly very passionate, and I heard some things that he is I think he's very into, I think, like dreams and nightmares. And I think before this he was making shorts. Like, he would ask people online like what some of their most like the scariest or most like vivid recurring nightmares were, and he would like make these shorts kind of based on these nightmares, which you can totally understand that when you watch this. Like, it feels like a just a very, very long nightmare that like you can't escape. So yeah, I mean, kudos to that and to trying to do something different. But it's everything about it sounds so much better than the actual act of watching it. It's just like it's so frustrating to say, because watching it is like it is a chore. And yeah, but when you sit back and actually talk about it, you talk about like the style and what it's doing and some of the specific scenes, like all of that sounds really cool. But
but it's just, I think it's just a case of a balance of like finding the thing that also works as a piece of entertainment to as well as all these things you're doing. And I'm someone who loves art house cinema. I'm someone who loves a nice long shot. But if I was to compare it to something like not a horror director, but Bellatar, who's this filmmaker who's known for these like really long takes and stuff like that, and I've seen a few of his movies and I really loved them. And I've shown at least one to Connor, and he wasn't that into it. He thought it was too long and slow and boring. And I loved it.
What movie was it?
The Man from London was the one that I showed him.
Okay, I don't think I've heard of that.
Yeah. He's also directed Werkmeister Harmonies, which I really liked, and The Touring Horse, amongst others. He's got like a 7-hour long movie that I've not watched yet. It's been on my to-do list for years, but obviously it's 7 hours long, so I keep putting it off. But the difference is though is that his long shots, like they're long kind of like shots where it'll like move around the scene, or it'll go from one side of the room to the other, and it'll tell a story in the shot. And it'll always feel like there's stuff in the scene. Whereas in this movie, you're looking at the corner of a door frame for 3 minutes. Yeah. Like there's not really anything happening, and it's just it was like soak in the atmosphere. Like, okay, I'm done soaking in though. Like it's time to maybe give me a little tease of what's going on.
Exactly.
So I in many ways I am the target like audience for this, and I know some people have been really into it. It got a lot of buzz. It had kind of an unfortunate thing where it actually leaked online from a film festival last year. Someone got a hold of the digital file and it went all over the internet. But bizarrely, it being pirated all over the internet actually ended up giving it a lot of buzz because people who had seen it were starting to like say how great it was. And that's kind of led to it being picked up and stuff like that. So it's kind of this weird, like, obviously that's unfortunate, but it created this buzz about it. So yeah.
I mean, I don't know if like if there's any weight to it, but like I've heard some people on podcasts kind of speculating that like, oh, like they did that on purpose to specifically kind of drum up interest and buzz about it, which I mean, to be fair, I mean, that could be definitely a way to get people to talk about it. I mean, it could easily go the other way where people just watching like, oh, what is this crap, and never talk about it. But I guess if it gets in the hands of like the right people that can kind of start shouting across the internet, that makes it become a thing. I never heard about it like coming online. I was first exposed to it just when the trailer came out. I saw like a lot of people talking about it, and the trailer hooked me right away. Like which is funny because you do like those static shots and stuff like in the trailer, and it's a much shorter version, but it does hook you like right away, and you are kind of like, oh wow, like this looks so different and weird and disturbing that I gotta check out what it is. But
Yeah, I think just something as simple as giving in a little bit and just occasionally having like a two shot from behind of the kids. You have to show their faces because that's one of the big things in the movie is that you basically never see a proper full face, right? It's always from behind, or when you do eventually see a face, there's kind of like some obscurity going on. Like just like maybe a little bit more dialogue between the kids to actually sort of like give us more of a story, like context as the scene as it's progressing, because there's times where they won't be talking for a long time, and then you get a few sentences that sort of give you enough to try and get what's going on, but it's just a little bit more to kind of draw us in. That's the thing, is that when your film's being silent, that's okay if you're telling a story with the visuals, and it's okay if you have like a really sort of like almost nothing shot that's meant to be obscure. But that's when you have maybe dialogue kind of tell the story more. So the idea is that you're imagining the context of the conversation because you don't have enough details of the visuals. So the idea that you do one or the other. I think the problem sometimes with this for long periods is that it doesn't have either. It won't have any dialogue and it won't have any sort of like discernible like image that you can make it and out of. Occasionally something will happen and they'll do a thing where something disappears or something, but for the most part you're staring at a door frame, or you're staring at the edge of a couch, or you're staring at a few Lego bricks on the ground or something like that. And it does just it's kind of a bit boring when it gets to those parts, unfortunately.
And like and also like sometimes like when there is dialogue, like it's not always the easiest to understand. I mean, luckily I'm watching this at home, so I can always like rewind or put on subtitles if I need to, but like sometimes like if you miss something, or like sometimes someone's talking but like you can't really understand it, but then it's like, oh wait, am I not supposed to understand it, or is it just because like I don't have it turned up enough? Like, should I try to make out what they're saying, or is it supposed to just sound like muffled noises? I don't know.
Also, there's actually some just burned in subtitles occasionally as well. Like some lines have subtitles no matter what, which it is a creative choice that was made to make sure that you can understand certain parts of information at the very least. It's tough to talk. I mean, obviously we actually talk about the spoilers, and we talk about what we think's going on, and some of the notable scenes in the movie, because there's a great final image to the movie. There's a great jump scare near the end. There's a couple of really good sequences in here. But yeah, so I don't know. I think there's not much more we can say, I don't think, without going into the plot and stuff. So I guess we'll give the spoiler warning and we'll dive into the movie. So you have been warned.
Let's just open the spoiler door for a sec. Where'd it go?
That's why
usually the spoiler door is right here.
That's one of the first weird things that happens, isn't it? Is that there's like a door frame that just disappears and becomes a wall.
Yeah.
That happens quite early on. Yeah. Honestly, there's no way we can go through this movie in order. I'm never going to remember the order of the events properly. It's never happening.
And I'll say the only like really the thing I only really knew about the plot just from like reading synopses or like hearing people talk about it before I actually watched it myself is that I heard people say that it was about two kids who wake up like one day and their parents are missing, and all like the doors and windows of their house have disappeared, so they're basically like stuck in kind of like this one area of the house, and that there's like a voice that kind of keeps beckoning them to I think when I originally going in, I thought it was like there was like a voice upstairs that was beckoning them to come, which isn't exactly accurate. Like there is a voice, but it's not just like specifically contained into one place. But that's basically like what I knew coming in.
Yeah, well, I mean, just to sort of break down the broad strokes of what's actually going on is there's two young kids, 6 and 4, a 6-year-old girl named Kayla and a 4-year-old named Kevin, and we hear their dad on the phone near the start saying that Kevin fell down the stairs, or at least that's what he was told by the sister, by Kayla, and that he was sleepwalking. That's the only thing we ever really hear from the dad, and then he seems to disappear along with some of the windows and door frames and things like that, and the kids kind of end up like sleeping in the living room where the TV is, and they're scared to go anywhere else. And then creepy stuff starts happening. There's a chair in the ceiling at one point and other stuff like that. As the movie progresses, you know, Kayla's led up to the parents' bedroom where some stuff happens. I won't get into it yet, but fundamentally it feels like there's an entity in this house that seems to have killed the parents and is coming after the kids. And we're in spoilers, so, you know, I'll just sort of keep going here. And, you know, ultimately seems to kill Kayla and then eventually kind of just keeps torturing this 4-year-old boy for the rest of the movie. And, you know,
which I guess is like a low, like 572 days.
yeah, there's a yeah, we'll get to that. Like, I feel like I don't know how to just interject that. No, so that's the broad strokes of it, right? I was thinking early on, because it really focused on this idea of like the mum was already gone and now they're worried that they can't find their dad, and I think one of them has the line, maybe he went with mum. And it made me, it really sounded to me like the mother was already dead and that they were worried that the dad was dead. And I thought this was a movie about like a dad who had committed suicide because his wife had already died for some reason. And you know, I was thinking, oh, this is about the horror of being left alone with no parents. You know, not that that's literally what's happening, but more just that that's what it represented, and that this was all like how dreadful it would feel if you're a little child and you're scared and you're alone, you're hearing noises in the house, because, you know, kids think they hear monsters in the house. That's just like a thing. That's just something that kids do. So that's what I was kind of getting from that. But we'll get into the specific big moments. So I mean, the first big thing really is that a voice like calls Kayla up to the parents' bedroom, and we get maybe the best scene in the movie in the bedroom, I would say.
Oh yeah, just to actually something I just wanted to bring up before we kind of move on to there.
Oh yeah.
Is one thing. One thing I do want to give credit to the movie is I do think it does a really good job of like kind of putting you into that place of like, yeah, being a kid and kind of being scared of like being in like your own house, like, you know, whether it's because you're alone or because it's at night, or like you said, because you like hear like a noise or something. Like it like does a really good job of like putting you kind of into that headspace of a child, which I mean, yeah, you know, probably a lot of that is because of like, you know, most of the movie is from it almost feels like a first person shooter or something, like as like a child, like everything is kind of like low level to the ground and stuff. But yeah, like that's definitely one thing that I was pretty impressed by.
Yeah, the scene in the bedroom's really good though, because it's Kayla comes in, and again, I say Kayla comes in. We never see Kayla in this scene. Like, it's kind of POV, I guess, but it's hard to kind of tell exactly. But it's POV at least at a certain point, because she sees her dad sitting on the edge of the bed, and it's like, well, where's he been? He's just sitting there. What's going on? And we hear the dad say, "Look under the bed," and she like goes to look under the bed, and there's just darkness. She can't see anything. She pops her head back up. He's still sitting there, and then she looks again, and when she pops her head back up, the dad's not there anymore, but on the opposite edge of the bed, on the other side, the mother seems to be sitting there. And it's just, I mean, describing it doesn't even sound that good, but in the movie it's quite creepy. Like when she pulls her head up and it's like a woman now sitting on the other side of the bed, it's actually a really creepy moment. And like eventually the mother starts talking and says, what does she say? She says something like, your father still loves you, or something like that. I can't remember the exact words.
Something, yeah. This is like, yeah, kind of one of the reasons why I do want to go back and watch it again, just because yeah, I feel like there's stuff that easily escaped my brain, especially like kind of forget how much I watched it that first night, but I was so tired. I don't know, but it is funny though, like, because it does remind me of like you're saying, like PT earlier, like it does feel like something like that you would have to do in that game, where it's like, you know, look under the bed once and then look under the bed twice, and then it's like, you know, something changes that, you know, to bring about like a new scene to keep going forward.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, and again, this feeling that the bad things already happened and that these kids are just like sort of trapped in this kind of not afterlife, but like just this nightmare of that they're in. That's kind of what it feels like, and so the mother says, "Yeah, we love you," or something ominous like that. I mean, it sounds ominous in the scene. But then like the camera turns and looks into this sort of like pitch black open space in the closet, so it's just like a void of darkness, and you just hear I think the mother says, "There's someone here," and this is kind of the first indication that there's like an entity in the house. There's a presence of some kind, and the mother like calls out and like has moans of pain and is like crying and is like kind of angry. It kind of sounds like this entity's like killed the parents first, right? Killed the mother first, then the dad, and this is what Kayla's hearing in this scene. And it's like, okay, now you kids are really on your own, and you're alone with this monster, whatever it may be. I was also thinking that maybe you could sort of read this as kind of like a metaphor for like kind of like the idea of like depression spreading throughout like a family. And the idea that, if the mother was like suicidal and was depressed, and it kind of like made the dad also kind of like down and depressed, and then maybe the kids are destined to kind of have those feelings because this is the experience they're going through. I don't know. I was wondering if that was kind of the
there could be something there. Like stuff like that can definitely like affect like everyone's mood, and then like as a partner, like you might not know how to deal with it, and then that can kind of give you some anxiety, depression. Then like as a kid, like you might not know exactly what's happening, but there's something wrong, so you kind of tiptoe around everything, and you don't really feel like you're necessarily like in on like what the problem is. And so I can definitely see like there being something to that.
Yeah, I also considered as well that maybe like the dad was like was abusive or something, and he like killed the wife. And like this awful entity is like a representation of the monster that he really was. But again, I'm just kind of like reading these different things because I feel like they're all possible as far as like a reading the movie goes.
And as far as I think what I've heard from like the director is I think he's been like one of those people that doesn't really like to which I think makes sense, like with this type of movie or whatever, but he's like not really giving like clear answers, like, oh no, it's actually about this. Like he kind of says like, well, once you watch the movie, it's your movie now, like whatever your interpretation or what you think is going on, like that's what's going on. Like it's he's like one of those dudes.
He's one of them.
Which I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Like I think that that's like accurate, like the way you interpret like the art or whatever, like whatever it means to you, is valid. It doesn't, you don't always need like these clear cut answers from the maker or whatever. But yeah, if anyone like wants any like very specific, like, oh no, it's definitely about this, right? I don't think the director is going to give that to you.
Yeah. I mean, David Lynch famously, if there's some interviews with him where someone asks, can you explain this thing at the end of this movie? And he just goes, no. It just point blank, no, you get nothing. Yeah. So I mean, Kayla returns to Kevin and just like wants to like basically barricade the hallway with the couch to like be like, we're scared, let's go. And this part was a little confusing to me, what happened exactly next, where like I legitimately wasn't sure, because some time passes with the usual stuff that happens in the movie, which is some items disappearing. The TV's on, we're looking at the corners of like door frames and stuff, and it feels
like stuff starts, well, I don't know if I'm going too far ahead, but like stuff starts popping up on the ceiling or it's like sticking against the wall or whatever.
I think there's one example of that here. I think there's like a doll around, maybe like a Barbie doll around here that's on the ceiling, which is one of the most like shared images that's used in the marketing.
Yeah, that shows up a lot. Yeah.
But Kayla kind of disappears and Kevin's on his own, and Kevin sort of is like called down into the basement, and ultimately I didn't realize in the moment exactly if this was his sister Kayla, because Kayla like so we see her turn round and she's like not got any eyes or a mouth. It's and not that there's like holes where they were, it's more like the skin's covering them now. So it's kind of this creepy image. But to be honest, because there was no facial features, and because obviously it's really dark and grainy and it's very, as obscure as it can be, I genuinely wasn't sure if this was Kayla or the mum, because like you could have told me it was an adult and I would have believed you. Like I really wasn't that sure. It was when I went to actually read the plot synopsis online that it made it clear that No, this was Kayla, and this was Kayla, and then later on the demon also, or well, I'm saying demon, like demon may not be the right term, but later on
the voice like confirms it.
Yeah,
like,
the voice says, you know, he did this to Kayla because she didn't do what she was told. I'll be honest, I don't think I got that she was like being asked to do something before this scene and didn't do it. I don't think I caught that.
Do we? Yeah, I mean, do we know what he wanted her to do? Because I remember specifically the demon saying, yeah. I guess the way I kind of took it is like the demon probably asked her to do, or if it was something like, you know, she wasn't supposed to leave upstairs when the demon told her to, you know, come upstairs or whatever, that he was mad about that or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I assume it was something simple, like she was supposed to go somewhere and she didn't, and that's all it was. But it never, like, I never got that in like the build up to this reveal of her face. So the reveal of her face was just kind of, I was like, whoa, okay, I guess that happened to her. Yeah. You know, and again, I wasn't 100% sure it was her. I thought it might be the mum. I thought that might be what the mum looked like now.
Yeah.
I'm sure if I watch it again, it'll be really obvious as a kid. But like in the moment, because it's like really grainy and scratchy, and you know, it's obviously in darkness and all that. Like, and it's one of the few times you actually see the front of someone's face, and it's not really a full face. You know, it's covered up by extra skin and whatnot.
Yeah. It is a pretty good scare. I mean, to be fair, I guess like. You know, after so much of like just like a lot of like long static shots, like, you know, of just like walls and couches and toys and stuff, like anything that's not that is gonna like really like spike it up. I don't know if that's like intentional to kind of try to elevate some of the scares by having so much nothingness like before them, but it's effective for sure.
Yeah, and then it does get really dark after this though, because the voice actually, because the voice at this point starts directly talking to Kevin, and I think this is maybe the first time you really hear it. Well, no, you hear it saying, you know, come upstairs to her, I suppose, earlier, but here it's a bit more in depth, where he tells Kevin to get a knife out of the drawer and stab himself, which he seems to do. You never actually see obviously it happen. You see some blood like on like a counter or something afterwards. You see like some blood dripping down somewhere, but of him himself, you get like one quick shot of him from behind, and it's almost like it's saying that shot of him from behind is the moment when he stabs himself in the eye, but it never like you ever see the actual thing happening. It's just really intense in how it's like portrayed, which, you know, is really dark. And it just moves on. You don't even hear him cry out afterwards. You don't hear him like be in pain or anything like that. The movie just kind of continues with this assumption that he is like stuck a knife in his eye.
You know what's kind of funny is like, you know, I mean it's obviously very sad and I feel bad for him, but like I didn't find that like that, you know, this part as affecting as I did the phone call to like 911, like that, like I don't know, I felt like so sad hearing just this like you know, little child's voice, and especially as like, you know, a father of like a young kid, like it's hard not to kind of, you know, think of your kid in that situation, and it's just like, oh man, like I want him to get help so bad.
Yeah, that's what comes next, is he like phones the police, like this, like, you know, and obviously it's a very abstract movie, but part of you's like, wait, there's a phone sitting there the whole time, you little shits. Why didn't you use it? But he phones the
Am I wrong? Did they try before and it was just like dial tones? Like, could they not call someone, or am I just misremembering something?
I don't remember that, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen. I could have missed that.
I mean, I could be wrong, but I mean, there's so many like shots of just like random things, and I don't know, who knows.
But he phones the police and says that he's been cut with a knife and he feels sick. And the person on the other line says, you know, ask some questions like, where are you? How old are you? And the you know, Kevin keeps whispering, and the person's like, why are you whispering? Is there someone in the room with you? That kind of thing. And it's just, we hear this all play out whilst we're basically just looking at a dark room. We don't see any, you know, him on the phone or anything like that. And it's kind of effective because, and I think the reason why this is more effective is that if you take it out of the context that we're in the horror movie, is that this very much sounds like a kid phoning for help when he's in a house with an abusive adult of some kind, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And that part of it feels very real. And that's like, and the person on the phone's like, hey, there's grown-ups coming to help you. Like, just stay on the line. There's grown-ups coming. But then, of course, the entity turns the phone into like a kid's toy phone. Like it becomes like a phone with like eyes and a mouth and stuff. Which I'll just mention it here. That actually ends up being one of the best jump scares of the whole movie. It's right towards right before the end. There's a shot where it cuts to this phone and then the eyes just move after a second, and it sort of is accompanied with like a loud like phone ringing sound that just it really startles you and kind of wakes you up. If you were getting drowsy at that point in the movie, that was going to wake you up. So very good stuff.
That's the other thing. Like I saw lots of people like, you know, tweeting out pictures of that phone and just being like, you know, F this phone and stuff.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. Yeah. And it's around here because Kevin says, "Did you do that?" And the entity's like, "Yeah, I can do anything." And Kaylee didn't do what I told her to, so I did what I did to her. And he insists that Kevin go upstairs, which he does. And things get really weird here because he's kind of like, we've seen some items be on the ceiling before. Like we've seen like a chair on the ceiling, we've seen the doll on the ceiling. But here, like it's like Kevin's on the ceiling, so we're seeing like the tops of the door frames, but upside down, as if we're walking on the ceiling with Kevin. And he goes into one of the rooms, and it's like he goes through like a dark void, and we then see like what seems like an infinite hallway filled with all the toys that we've been seeing in the movie. That's when the text comes up on the screen, just saying 570 some 72. 572 days. So I don't know if this is saying that there's a time jump here and it's still going on after 572 days. If you consider some of the theories that I was throwing around earlier, maybe if this was about when someone got sick or if the father did like do something to the mother, maybe this is saying it's 572 days since the start of this, like since the manifestation that led to all this. I don't know. Honestly, that 572 days is open to a lot of interpretation.
Yeah. I think no matter how you look at it, though, it's like pretty horrifying just to think, though, of having to like live with this situation for that long, period, whether it's, like you're being stuck somewhere or you're just being tormented by this thing. Like, I
mean, I think that's what the doors and windows disappearing is, and that feeling of being trapped is like, if you're a kid, you feel like you're trapped with whatever like adults you're saddled with, right? So if you're not in a good environment with good parents and you feel scared by them, or you've been kidnapped and you feel scared by them, whatever the situation is, if you're like 4 and 6, you feel like you have no power, like you have no. Like, escape feels impossible. It feels like you can't do anything. And I think that's kind of what that represents, is that, not literal, but the idea that you feel trapped in a situation. That's what that is going for, yeah.
Yeah.
And a bad family situation would certainly fall under that. So, but that's not to say that I'm leaning towards that. Like, I think it's equally like an illness thing that's spread throughout the family. I think it's, and when I say illness, I mean mental illness. I mean, like, the mother like maybe committed suicide and that's led to, or just died and then that led to the dad committing suicide, and that's what it represents. Or maybe it represents an abusive father who's done something to the wife and then the kids have felt trapped with him, or they've been left alone without them. But it does feel like it's open to interpreting what it means. Like, obviously, literally in the movie, there is an entity. There is like an entity that's done something to the parents and is now tormenting the children, specifically Kevin, who's been left on his own ultimately. But it does feel ripe for talking about and sort of like thinking about, okay, what does this represent in the real world? And part of that, and I think that's why that phone call with the police is so real feeling, is that part of it feels like it is just out of a real situation, despite the fact that the context is absurd.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, after this part, we see a bunch of photos.
Yeah, and just to, I guess before we go, like, I guess maybe I'm not adding much, but just the that shot of the hallway though, like, looked so cool. Like,
shit, go on.
Yeah, just the way it just like seemed to like stretch on forever and ever. Like that's,
it's again, also like, one of the few shots in the movie that's not like looking at a weird corner or something. It's like just like a wide shot of this like hall with all these toys in a pile in the middle. Yeah. Like
I don't know if that helps like set it apart, but I mean even without it though, it's just like an example of like this is like good filmmaking. Like it feels so weird and dreamy, and like I feel like I'm stuck in this hallway that is just going on forever and ever and ever.
Yeah. It almost makes you wonder if it's implying that this entity goes around doing this to multiple families, and that these toys are pilling up from different families that he's tormented or something like that.
That's a good point.
I know. But we see all these photos of like people, presumably family photos of the family, but like parts of their faces are missing, or in most cases I think their whole head's missing. But there's maybe one or two that it's like the daughter who
seems like the eyes are like or crossed out or missing or something, or like.
Yeah, it was like, no, it was kind of like what we saw earlier with her. But some of the
like just like no face.
Yeah.
Like...
But some of the other photos were more like Back to the Future. You know when like Marty's like disappearing from the photo?
Yeah.
Like some of them were just like missing a head or something like that. I don't know if it's maybe implying how the entities killed some of them, like maybe in different ways, and you know the parents are missing their heads because he decapitated them or something. Maybe that's too literal of a read, but yeah, the end, you know, and we see like just some obscure like blood spatter as if the kid Kevin's being tortured, and it's just like blood spattering on the floor, but it keeps like sort of disappearing and coming back, which is interesting actually. Now I'm thinking about it, it's like a video glitch, and then it disappears but then it glitches back in. And I'm like, oh, is that like, I don't know what that I'm trying to think of a thing that could be represented, and I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I got nothing.
Like because if this represents like mental torture and like mental pain and mental illness, is it the idea that it's like clicking in and out of reality because it's not visually really there, but we're seeing it kind of like show through or something?
Okay.
I'm sorry, am I boring you, Tim?
A little bit, but it's okay.
So
I'm very tired. You know I'm tired.
I know. So yeah, the end of the movie. Although I'm just because I've got the plot description up at the side here, because honestly I was worried that I was not going to remember like moments, so I have it up next to me. One of the things towards the end of the movie though is so the telephone eye thing, this blood spatter thing. You hear Kevin call out for his mother as if he's in danger, which again kind of made me think of like a kid being abducted by someone and like wanting their mummy, and that being like the dread of this. And honestly, the idea that this all just came about because I think the director said this was like the most common type of dream that was submitted, was the idea that you're a kid who's alone in a house and your parents aren't there, and that's really what this came from. Is it seemed to be the most shared dream from childhood.
Interesting.
So yeah. Anyway, the final shot of the movie though is that it's just a black screen, but you see kind of like a very sort of obscure face kind of appears, a face of the entity, whatever it may be, and it's just like sort of a white blurry face in complete darkness, and it just tells Kevin to go to sleep. And I can't, again, going back to the mental illness thing, that kind of, it was, to me, that kind of sounded like it was saying, okay, give up, stop fighting, and just lose. That's what that kind of sounded like to me, if I'm reading into that. But he says go to sleep, and then Kevin asks who it is, and the entity doesn't respond. It just cuts to black. Or does it fade away into darkness first, then it cuts to black? I'm not sure. But either way, it doesn't give a response. It's just this... But that shot of just the face in the darkness is really great. And if anything, that's the thing that I was trying to kind of replicate a little bit with my fancy camera thing going on right now.
Yeah, it's funny because, like, out of context, if you just showed, you know, that scene, that like a screenshot of that or whatever, people would probably just be like, okay, it just looks like a blurry face or whatever. But in the context of the movie, it's so powerful from, you know, just... you barely are seeing like any other people throughout the whole movie, and then every time you do it's usually quick, or like it's someone with like a messed up face. So, and you've had like this, you know, creepy ominous voice that's been so present, and then to finally get like a face to that, even if it is just you know, like a very just blurry little thing, like it's still so powerful.
I mean, arguably it's the only face we see in the whole movie, technically.
Sure. Oh yeah.
You know, everyone else we never see their face. They're always obscured, or they're missing features or whatever. This is the closest thing to an actual face from the front that we see the entire thing. And maybe that's the idea that like everyone in the movie literally could not face what they were going through, and that's why all the faces are obscured and missing, and then we finally see this dude. Or whatever.
Very
it is.
nice. Yeah. I like that.
I don't know. Maybe I'm grasping at nothing there. I don't know. Like, I think that the thing with this movie is that I do love that it is this passion project from a person who clearly, for better and for worse, this is the movie that Kyle Edward Ball wanted to make. This is the film he wanted to do. Is his artistic vision, and it does feel unfiltered. It feels very much just what it wants to be. It just might be a case that he's gone a little too far with some of the elements, and that's a shame because, like, I'm not saying that he should like compromise it because it is working for some people. I am seeing some people praise it and kind of like it's clicking with some people, and that's great. I wish I clicked with it more than I did. I think there's certain moments, that face at the end, the bedroom scene, most of the scenes where the entity's talking to one of the kids are by and large pretty good. But yeah, there's just lots of moments. I mean, I guess you could take all the things because obviously it's all the doors and window frames that all go at first from the house, but then eventually some toys start disappearing, some other items start disappearing. The toilet seat disappears at one point. Oh yeah. I guess you could say it's like literally these kids' world is literally being slowly ripped away from them. So if they have a happy family life and now it's like being ripped away, it's literally the objects in the house that are slowly disappearing, and eventually it's just going to be them and this inevitable truth of this dark entity, whatever it may be, which again could represent a lot of different things depending on how you want to read into it. But
and you just watched it today, right?
Yeah, I finished it like 15 minutes before we came online.
Because one thing I'm curious about is I've actually seen this like with multiple people that have kind of been like they've watched it, and they'll be like, oh, screw this movie, I hated it, and like the next day they'll be like, what, to give it credit, I am still thinking about it, and then like the next day they're like, you know what, I think I actually kind of like it now that like it gets trapped in your head. So that's one thing I'm kind of curious about, like revisiting it, or even not revisiting it right away, just kind of letting it sink in and think about it more and more, and to see if how that'll kind of shape my opinion. I know I'm not in like I'm not super excited to like go in and watch like the whole movie, like, start to finish again. But it is something that I'm like, I wouldn't mind like throwing on this scene again, or like, watching the ending again, like, cause the scenes that are good, like a lot of the ones that we point out, are really freaking good, and like I do kind of want to experience them again.
I would. I forgot what I was going to say, Tim. there was something to go along with what you just said, and I've just completely forgotten it. I've piped up. Sorry.
No, it's all right. Yeah. I mean that's just one thing I thought was interesting is it seems like not for everybody. There are people that watch it, don't like it, and probably won't change their minds. But I've definitely seen like a number of people that it's grown on them, that
I certainly respect it. Like I think the experience of watching it was really, it was like kind of frustrating at times, but like I definitely respected all the good parts and kind of what it was going for. Actually, the thing I was going to say, it came back to me, is I'm a little like, I'm not sure how I'll feel on a rewatch if I do ever rewatch it. Part of me thinks that maybe the bits that I found like frustrating and boring to get through, like they'll be worse because it's like, oh, I'm here again and I'm sitting through these minutes again. And part of me is like, no, maybe I'll be more like locked into it because I've got a better idea of what the whole thing is, and I'll be kind of engrossed in it more and like paying attention for the smaller details to get a better understanding of it. I'm genuinely not sure. Like part of me, I won't watch it again anytime soon, I can tell you that much. But it's the sort of thing where maybe in a few years' time, maybe I'll be like, you know what, maybe it's time to give this a revisit and see if it's grown on me. Because there are some movies that do that with you. And certainly the ones that are a bit weirder and the ones that are a bit different, maybe you have to kind of like rework your brain a little bit to get on the same wavelength. Like this is not functioning like a normal movie, and you have to kind of accept that. I think that's the thing that's kind of weird to me though, is that this is clicking with a certain audience, and I feel like when it comes to movies like this, I tend to be in that certain audience when it clicks with some people and not others. But I'm not in this case. At least not fully, right? There's a disconnect because I do think some of it's a frustrating chore to get through. Yeah. But parts of it do really work, and I do love what it's going for. So it's a very frustrating one to kind of sum up my thoughts as a whole on.
I know I've definitely had that feeling before, where like I've looked at a movie and been like, or maybe not always a movie, sometimes a book or a comic or video game or something, where I look at it and I'm like, on paper this is like screaming like that it's for me, but just something about it doesn't click. And sometimes that's like worse than just some stupid thing that you don't care about. It's like, no, like I want to care about this. I wish that this could be my thing, but it's not.
Yeah, and I think it's clear that neither of us are being like hateful to it, because some people who see this have responded with, I hate this, I hate this movie.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Like I am mad that I sat through that, and I'm not like
not at all.
If nothing else, that this was interesting enough that I'm happy to have went through the experience once, so that I can talk about it and
totally
see the parts of it that I do really like. But so yeah, I love that it exists, but not all of it worked for me, at least on this first viewing. Maybe it'll work better a second time, but like I wouldn't be in a rush to see it a second time too soon, because it is kind of it takes a lot out of you. Maybe it's the sort of thing where if you show it to someone else, maybe you'll get into it in a weird way as well. Although I could see showing it to someone else, like living or dying on how that person takes it. If that person gets frustrated after 10 minutes and says, this is terrible, I hate this, then I think that would colour the rest of that experience, and they just won't get into it, and you won't get into it now either, because you're with someone who's complaining about it, versus someone who's like kind of sucked into it and whatever. I do almost wish I got a chance to see this in a theatre where there really was no distractions and I was just like surrounded by darkness.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking the same thing, because I hate to admit it, but there are definitely times when I could feel like my hand creeping to the cell phone, be like no, I want to sit here and pay attention, but then it's like your mind starts to wander a bit or something, and
honestly, my favorite thing about going to the movies, honestly, like obviously the big screen's great, the big sound system's great. My favorite thing about it though is just this, like, I will pay attention no matter how bad the movie is. Like,
absolutely,
I've made this deal to sit in a dark room with strangers and pay attention to the movie, and there's no talking, there's no looking at the phone. And there's this like weird like setting you put yourself in where it just like I never even think about looking at a phone when I'm in a movie theater, and people who do are scum and should be let out on a leash. Yeah,
it baffles my mind that they're like, I feel like it's like every time I go to the movie, there's always like at least one person that's like either on their phone or just very like blatantly loudly talking to their friend or whatever, and I'm just like, it's like, how are you okay with this? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me.
It's so silly. But yeah, I think this would have been a good theater watch. As much as I can see why people would say, "Oh, watch it, home alone on a laptop screen in your lap in bed with headphones on at night at like 3 a.m. I get why people would recommend that, but I almost feel like the experience of like just being like, I almost feel like I'd be more unnerved being surrounded by strangers watching this than I am at any point
for sure.
sitting watching it on my own. So, yeah, it was an interesting one to talk about. I mean, I'll
for sure.
I'll say that much. Yeah, I have no idea what I'm going to rate this, Tim. Do you have an inkling?
I think so. It's I mean, I will say I think it is very hard to rate. I think the number I'm kind of floating around is like a 6. Like,
sure, yeah.
Where, because I'm definitely more positive on it than I am negative. And there is like, enough cool stuff there, and it's different enough. It's an experience. It's experimental. It's made by someone who's clearly passionate. So I think there's lots of reasons to check it out. But yeah, just the again, the act of watching it is kind of rough. It does feel like a chore at times, and it can be a little bit of a battle of endurance. But I mean, if you're someone that is able to make it through that, I think you will get rewarded with like some really cool stuff. And it's and again, it's going to be very different than a lot of things that you're used to. So if you're like anti art house, like then you don't want to go near it with like,
oh yeah, stay away
at all.
Stay far. If you're someone who thinks like even The Witch was too like slow in art house, like you're going to absolutely despise this movie.
Yeah, and I always hate stuff like this because like there'll be like scenes that are really like tense, and you'd be like, oh man, this is like one of the creepiest things I've seen in a while, and then that always like there are always those people there that will take that as a challenge. So there's like some meatheads that are probably seeing this going like, oh, people think it's so scary, and then they watch and go, that wasn't scary, that was stupid, and like it's like, oh, you're already not meeting like the movie on its own terms. But whatever. I don't know, it's very strange. I feel like I feel like a 6 is the right score, but it does feel like a little low, which is, I don't know, kind of weird, but I think that's where I'm gonna go with it, at least for right now.
Yeah, I think I'm hovering around a 6 as well, and I wish it was higher. This felt like the sort of movie that I could have loved, like I could have been like really passionate about, and like for all the reasons that I've kind of mentioned. But I think right now it's this at a 6. Maybe in time it'll go up. Maybe I'll think about it more. Maybe I'll see it again in the future, and maybe I'll, the fact that I'm thinking it has a chance of doing that is worth something. Like that is, this is not some movie that I'm going to just forget about. Like it is definitely an experience. So, yeah, I guess that'll do Skinamarink.
No, let me ask you this just for a little food for thought. Like how excited does this make you for like the director's next project? Like, are you absolutely 100% on board? Can't wait to see what he does next, or are you like, well, we'll see, but I don't know, I'm a little timid about it or something?
I'd say I'm on board. I would say that I'd be fascinated to see what he does next and see if like how he progresses as a filmmaker.
Yeah,
I think I'd be curious to see what he does next. So
yeah, me too. Like even though it doesn't 100% work, like he's clearly someone with a vision that I'd much rather see what interesting thing he's gonna do next versus
William Brent
whatever.
Bell or something, someone like that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if he's doing another boy or orphan movie, I mean, come on.
Yeah. Also, a little note is the title comes from an old song, like a kid's song.
Oh yeah. Which they never like play it at all, though. Huh?
No, I assume maybe that one's copyright because they make a point of saying that all the cartoons in the movie are public domain at the start.
Oh right,
Because unsurprisingly they couldn't afford to license, famous stuff. But one of the little details that I read online was that the spelling of the movie is different from the song though. He picked it for a few reasons. It kind of like associated with childhood. It was kind of a personal thing, and it had a good sound to it and whatever. But he changed the spelling slightly, and the reason for that is because he didn't want kids searching for the song and finding his movie by accident.
Oh.
And all I could think of was like, no kid in 2023 is searching for this song. What are you talking about? Yeah. It's a nice sentiment, though. Like, it's a nice guy thing to do. But at the same time, I'm like, I don't think you had to worry about it, to be honest. But fair enough.
I could be wrong, but I think. I don't know if you read this or saw this too, but did they say that he filmed it in like his old family house?
Oh yeah, it was his own childhood home. Yeah, in fact, a lot of the toys that are in the movie were like toys that his parents had kept from his childhood.
That's another thing that's like really cool about it. It's like, oh, like this must be so personal for you.
Oh yeah, and he had a sister. So the two kids are basically him and his sister.
Interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of personal touches, and it makes sense why. They could make it on 15 grand. And apparently, like, even the filming equipment was mostly borrowed from somewhere. Like it was, so that's was really like just getting by the skin of your teeth kind of filmmaking, and turning out something interesting and very unique. And I wouldn't say it all works, but the stuff that does work shows a lot of promise. And I hope that if we get something a little more refined, for a second film, which I assume that people are going to be like wanting them to work now. Like people, I can imagine a studio giving them, a few $1 million budget, for example.
Oh, which for sure.
Isn't a lot, but it'd be a huge step up from this. So.
I heard, James Gunn has his eye on him for the next, I don't know, Birds of Prey movie. Tim
is making things up. He's talking nonsense. But it wouldn't shock me if like he ends up making something at A24 or something like that. Like if they like,
yeah, that seems the most likely.
yeah. So no, that's cool. So that's Skinamarink. Hopefully we've helped talk through some of this. Honestly, this may be the only movie in Streams After Midnight history that I got the plot description up on screen for when we were talking about it, just so I had like a reference to look over and see kind of roughly what was happening next, because there was no way I was going to remember a lot of this.
No.
Even though it sounds straightforward when you actually just read the description out loud.
It's what I mentioned that before. Like it's very different. Like it sounds so straightforward just reading the synopsis, but actually watching the movie, it feels like so different. Like, yeah, 'cause I thought there was so much stuff that I missed, and then I was reading it, I was like, oh no, I got that. I was like, okay, I guess I understood the movie. I didn't think I did, but
yeah, you know, so it's an interesting film, but yep. I guess that's us. I guess that Screams After Midnight. You can let us know what you think of Skinamarink in the comments if you wish. You can, of course, support all the content, support the show by going over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and supporting us for, any amount really. But at the $3 tier, you get access to the bonus episodes that we do once a month, and at $5 or more, you get even more streams, which is a monthly show. Now, they're both on pause whilst Tim's away on paternity leave for a good portion of 2023, but there's a back catalogue which you get access to. Plus, you get bonus shows from other podcasts that we do on Mail Fuzz Movies, such as The Ace, the Atomic Cinema Experiment, our sci-fi movie podcast that I do with Tara, and the Collector's Cut that I do with David, where we work through movie franchises and things like that. So go check it out. You can support us that way. You can, of course, support us by liking, subscribing, dinging the bell for notifications, or rating the podcast on iTunes 5 stars, or wherever you get your podcast from. I will just wrap up by thanking our Patreon producers for the month. So thank you very much to Tyler Hess, Cindy Palacios, David Short, Bordnow, Christopher Moy, David Brown, and Al Treisman. And thank you to everyone who supports us on Patreon, or as a YouTube member, or has ever given us a super thanks on YouTube. All those things are greatly appreciated. But that is us. So thank you very much for joining us. And don't worry, our cameras will be back to normal for the next episode if you're watching the video version and think that was annoying. I thought it was kind of a cute idea, but
I liked it.
Your opinion may vary. But thank you very much for joining us. Keep watching scary movies, and we will see you next time.